Globalization is an objective process. People unite to form various unions which become bigger and bigger. The greatest achievement of this process would be the union of all mankind. Countries which are currently not part of any union would join in the future. The question is, which unions and on what principles? Not many people understand the objective nature of globalization. Everybody communicates, cooperates, makes friends, gets married and travels. This process cannot even be stopped by sanctions towards any country or civilization. In the end, this process of globalization will result in a world with a multinational culture. What kind of culture would unite the world depends solely on the people's choice. Today the world consists of three civilizations: the West, the East and the Russian. They are built on the basis of two opposite algorithms of unification: a conglomerate and a bloc. An interregional conglomerate is aimed at the destruction of governance in competing regions and absorption of parts that break apart. This goal is achieved through elimination of a region's governmental structure and repression of its population's intelligence. A conglomerate is centrally governed, concentrating the power by any means. National cultures of absorbed territories are replaced by a unified general culture. Therefore, an interregional conglomerate works by the principle the end justifies the means. Any means, including physical annihilation of dissidents, are used to get to the end, the goal. An example of a conglomerate is the Western civilization. The Western culture is based on the Bible with its aggressive and submissive policy. An alternative to the interregional conglomerate is a multi-regional bloc. A multi-regional bloc differs from conglomerate. As new regions join, their goal vectors are included into the bloc's common goal vector. This way the bloc is governed jointly and without conflicts in the interest of all of its participants. If the center becomes incapable of coordination, then another region takes over. In Russia, which is a civilization of the bloc type, such takeovers had happened several times. Великий Novgorod, Kiev, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, St. Petersburg were all governmental centers at various times. Such situation is also familiar to Iran, which had been a regional civilization in the past. At different times capitals were Ekbatana, Pasargada, Persepolis, Firuzabad, Tabriz, Kazvin, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tehran. The bloc works by the principle the means justify the end. That is, only good means qualify to achieve a goal. Hence, mistakes are only single episodes in the sequence of errorless means in the constructive direction. A multi-regional bloc is interested in forming the assembly intellect, which is synergetic. Therefore, cultural variety of regions is supported by the whole bloc in order to exchange experience and accumulate actual ideas in all of the regions. All in all, this approach provides long-term sustainability, stability and development of multi-regional bloc. Russia is multi-regional bloc. Without this knowledge, many foreigners misunderstand that Russian is a national affiliation, whereas it's civilizational. This is why around 200 nationalities that live in Russia are called Russians by Western and Eastern people. Experience accumulated by the Russian bloc allowed, for the first time in history, to analyze this problem area and even develop an alternative to the Western conception of globalization. Let's consider how interests of the Eastern, the Russian and the Western civilizations clashed with each other on example of Caspian Sea. As said earlier, the Western conglomerate is working to eliminate governmental sovereignty of regional civilizations. Its main opponents are still the Russia first of all, and the Eastern civilizations. The latter encompasses the most threatening to the Western civilization, Islamic civilization, where Iran is the possible future leader of consolidation of the Islamic bloc. After the clash of the Russian bloc, i.e. USSR, and the conglomerate, that is the West, the governmental center of the Russian bloc was destroyed as a result of the Western informational aggression. The bloc was split into parts. The Caspian region is a point where the Russian civilization, i.e. Russian Federation, borders the Islamic civilization, represented by Iran as well as lost parts of the Russian bloc, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan. The latter had already stepped on the path of reintegration of the future multi-regional bloc by entering the Eurasian Union. Since there are no Western countries around Caspian Sea, the Western conglomerate could not absorb the ex-Russian bloc parts. Then, absorbing new parts, the conglomerate tries to eliminate the governmental head and replace it by controlled elite, as well as including defective girls into the governance plan, which makes the region busy with own internal problems and unable to partake in the global politics. A striking example of this process are countries of Latin America, which had gone through a series of governmental changes and have unbearable debts and ecological problems. Since the elimination of the Russian governmental sovereignty is not possible for the West, the only way to achieve its goals is to eliminate governmental sovereignty of Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan. Then they could be used to provoke a confrontation between the Islamic world, that is Iran, and the Russian civilization, i.e. the Russian Federation. Important to note that political consequences of the confrontation are more important than economic. The union of Iran and Russia threatens most of all as a political factor of influence over the rest of the Eastern civilization. The presented scenario could be countered by creation of a new bloc based on equal partnership of countries in the Caspian region. To succeed, all Caspian countries have to leave the West-imposed conception of globalization behind. In this scenario, Russia could provide as a basis its own conception of globalization and an innovative complex of fundamental sciences. The Islamic world, with Iran, Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan in particular, have to move from the historical Islam to Quranic, which is also the path to unification of the Islamic world. The Caspian region could be the platform for implementation of the new economic model of equal cooperation. This partnership could be the start of the greater Eurasian Union construction as a multi-regional bloc. In order to mutually benefit from the cooperation and to close opportunities for the West to destabilize situation in the region by influencing a single member, all motions have to be discussed by all participants and decided upon univocally. This way, the region would develop and play an active role in the global politics, defending interests of all of its members. An example of such policy making could be a joint decision on energy sector, in particular on construction of pipelines at the bottom of Caspian Sea. The approaching convergence between Russia and Iran is counterproductive for the West. Agreement on the common goal vector of the two countries makes manipulation of them much harder individually. Hence, the West would be trying hard to jeopardize or block any joint projects or initiatives in the Caspian region. But Quran answers, "And hold fast altogether to the rope of God, and never be divided. Remember God's favor upon you. You were once enemies, and He reconciled your hearts so that through His favor you became brothers."